Welcome to MLM.com Web TV. We're happy to have you here for an episode in which we're going to be talking about what everyone is talking about anyway, and of course that is ZeekRewards. It was about 6 weeks ago that I was actually retained to assist ZeekRewards with some communications issues. They wanted me to work with their inbound call center. They were taking between 6,000 and 15,000 inbound calls a day. They needed to normalize some of that and work on a number of other communications issues, originally referred by their attorneys, as you might expect, wanting them to provide better services. I was there for about a heartbeat before the SEC shut the entire operation down. And I began to wonder, as I read the SEC filing, exactly what it was all about, because these seem to be really nice people. And so we have brought with us today Mr. Ron Pullman, who is an SEC compliance attorney with Jones Waldo, 25 years in the business, cut his teeth in the Silicon Valley, and then 20 years ago came to Utah. Ron, welcome.
Thank you.
You've had a chance to look at the filing,
yes,
read the press release. I think I understood some of it. Can you tell us exactly what the SEC was alleging from their filing?
Yes, there's really two things. First of all is that, as you probably know, since the Great Depression and when there were a lot of people out selling stock of all kinds and making all sorts of fraudulent claims, the SEC was created, and the game is, if you go out and publicly sell stock or what you would call a security, you have to get permission from the SEC to do that first. And the claim here is that ZeekRewards was out selling securities and had not gotten permission from the SEC to do that.
Now, what exactly is a security then?
Great question. Yes, great question. Anytime, say I give money to somebody else and I allow them to manage it, and I expect them to pay me back my money plus more.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime that happens, that's a security. And in this particular instance, what happened is ZeekRewards was really offering a security to its own distributors, who would sign up for this affiliate program, pay money into the program with the expectation of profit points in return. And the SEC's allegation is they didn't do anything to get those profit points other than put in the money. And hence it's a security, because the distributors were giving cash to ZeekRewards, relying solely on ZeekRewards to manage that money with an expectation of a return.
So from the way you describe it, the fact that ZeekRewards had upwards of $300 million in the bank, was tracking to do $1 billion in sales, $1.2 billion, I think, over the next 12 months, and may have had enough money to give people back whatever money they'd actually put in, that would not eliminate the issue of the unregistered security.
Right. It's like saying, well, I'm a really good driver and I stopped at that stoplight and I turned on my turn signal when I made that right turn, but I just went through that stop sign at 20 miles an hour.
I do that all the time.
The fact,
that's worse here, though, right?
Yeah, the fact is, it's still illegal.
Yeah.
It's anybody, anytime, who publicly sells a security without getting permission and filing all the documents required with the SEC is violating the law.
Now that brings us then to the issue of the Ponzi scheme.
Right.
Because I think that a lot of people think, well, but this isn't like Bernie Madoff. You know, Madoff, investors got back 10%, 2%, whatever on their money. Lots of people lost money. Even if no one had lost money in the end, and it remains to be seen how much money people will have lost, even if people had lost money, it would still conceivably have been a Ponzi scheme Because why?
It's fraudulent because the ZeekRewards was telling people that they were receiving a portion of the profits of the business, presumably generated from the actual bid auction process. That wasn't true. The fact
alleged not true.
Alleged not true by the SEC.
Yeah.
That apparently, that according to the complaint, the SEC is alleging that there, for example, was $250 million in the bank account, but the SEC, and this is the key point, if every person who was promised profits points said, I want that in cash, which they weren't doing, they were simply saying, oh, pay me 20% now, I'll take the other 80% in additional points. But if everyone had come in, as they had the right to do, and said, pay me in cash what I'm entitled to get back, ZeekRewards would have been required to pay out $45 million per day, and it would have depleted their cash in 5 or 6 days.
Very short period of time. Now, one of the questions that some people have had, because I think that the company was not represented so much as Paul Burks, the president, was represented to the SEC, and this agreement was entered into very, very quickly. I mean, from the time that the first reporter reported that something was happening until the time that they closed the doors and changed the locks was a few days. What would have happened in your estimation if ZeekRewards had said, well, we've got $300 million, let's hire 20 SEC attorneys and argue with them? Would that have changed anything?
Probably not, because at the point the SEC saw this, what they considered to be a Ponzi scheme happening, they need to act as quickly as possible to preserve as many assets as possible. So any amount of hiring additional attorneys would not have stopped the SEC from getting an injunction from a judge that would have frozen all the bank accounts, frozen all the documents, and basically shut them down.
Now, when we were talking prior to the program, you indicated that a lot of companies may get started not necessarily observing all the laws and might actually be defined as having some of the characteristics of a Ponzi, but over time they fix it by bringing in legitimate products and selling. So if they have enough running room, they get things turned around and they get started. I mean, Mark Cuban says that most of the money he first made was in some kind of a Ponzi scheme. And so does that happen frequently? Could that have happened at ZeekRewards if they had grown more slowly, do you think?
It's very difficult to get off of that train, I'll say, where you've committed to pay money back to the early investors, and they get these large returns, and then everybody else who jumps in and invests because they want those same large returns. And the fact is, it's very difficult to grow I'll call it a real operating business with real profits and be able to catch up. The lesson here really is, in the beginning of starting any business, engage good lawyers to assist so that you do things right. And everybody knows we don't always stop at every stop sign, but you should mostly try to stop. And you should certainly stop at stoplights. And you need to try to do your best early on to get the best legal counsel you can, so that in all respects you put your business together in a way so you don't have this kind of problem. Because what happened, they weren't doing this properly. It grew very large, very fast, got the attention of the SEC, and at that point you're going to get shut down.
And so with a company such as this, where although towards the end they were trying to normalize things, they had brought in a computer consultant to help them with computer programming. They wanted to beef up their call center so that they were responding to calls in a more timely fashion. They had an acting chief operating officer that was trying to normalize business processes. But even so, it would have been a long distance in your mind from that normalizing of business practices to actually turning them into a legitimate company, you think?
If ever.
And if ever, because of the product that they actually got started with.
Right, which they weren't making a lot of money off of, apparently, and yet their promises of returns to their distributors far, far exceeded their ability to generate profits from their operating business.
I mentioned to you just before we went on the air that I met Paul Burks, who seemed to me to be a sweetheart of guy, who had actually, his original career was as a country western singer and novelty magician. And actually, my first meeting with him, I asked him to show me some tricks, and he did some amazing things with a scarf. I hesitate to think the kinds of metaphors that may draw at the moment. But, and you said, well, that was the first mistake. What did you mean by that?
When Ronald Reagan became President of the United States, his experience had been mostly as an actor and a little bit as governor of California, which was its own lesson. But he didn't really know much about leading a country. No. So what did he do? He surrounded himself with the best and the brightest that he could to compensate for his lack of experience and lack of knowledge. That's the thing that I recommend strongly. It's, by the way, a rare person who will do that, because we all think we know everything, and we all think we can do everything. And so we just kind of, like a bull in a china shop, go in and, you know, the fact is, the smartest people in starting a business surround them, first of all, recognize their limitations and surround themselves with other good quality people who know how to do it right.
And do what they say.
Exactly. Because with attorneys, all the time we'll tell clients, you need to do this or you should do that. This is the best way to do it. Many times they ignore our advice, and usually bad things happen.
And we don't know how much of this advice they might actually have gotten. And because of the way the program was going and how successful it was, may have chosen to ignore.
Right.
Ron, thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine. Ron Pullman from Jones Waldo, talking to us about the SEC filing on ZeekRewards. I'm Clifton Jolly for MLM.com TV. Join us next time.